You're about to go live, guys. I'm just double checking one thing. Okay, cool. Shoot, my nerves are here. I'm a little nervous, but I'm here today. So, welcome to the Gamers Realm podcast. My name is Mr. Switch, and I'm here with the awesome Ray Strazis.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today, and he actually grew up an hour and 47 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now in Earlsville, Illinois. He spent a lot of his time reading comic books, science fiction stories. He was even he was an Air Force captain with the 5th Air Commando Squadron. He won a Bronze Star, 2 Air Medals, and he's known for a series of comedic mystery novels featuring Roger Rabbit, the creator of Roger Rabbit, Gary K. Wolf.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to be here today.
I'm glad to have you. I'm very excited to get to know you and, just kind of get a little bit of inside story of how things turned out. So my first major question I want to start off with is get a backstory on your life, and, from beginning, how you say, we have all night long. I'm kidding. just we'll stay under an hour right there. A little story of that, how Roger Rabbit came to be, and
sure,
and let us know.
Sure. Well, like you said, I grew up in a little farm town called Earlville, Illinois. I wasn't a farm boy. I didn't live on a farm. My father ran the pool hall in that town, and my mother worked in the school cafeteria as a cook. And I guess if you're gonna know about where Roger Rabbit came from, you have to go back to Earlville, because that's where it all started. And it all started when I was in the 2nd grade. I was in the 2nd grade, and my teacher gave the class a picture to color. And the whole premise of the assignment was stay inside the lines, just stay inside the lines. And I was great at staying inside the lines. So I took that picture home that night, and I looked at it, and it was a picture, a typical farm kind of picture. It was a farmhouse, it was a barn, it was a meadow, a fence, and a cow out in the middle of the meadow. So I colored the barn red, I colored the farmhouse yellow, because that's the color farmhouses were around Earlville. Colored the grass green, colored the fence brown, and I'm looking at that cow, and that cow was all by itself out there in the middle of that field. And my mother always told me that when people were all alone, that they got sad and lonely and they got blue. So I said, well, works for people, must work for cows. So I colored that cow blue, and I handed that paper in the next day. So the teacher graded them, and the following day, she gave all those papers back except for mine. And she said, Gary, she said, would you come up here to the front of the class? And I went up there. I said, oh my God, special treatment. I stayed inside the lines better than anybody. She said, now turn around and face the class. So I turned around and I faced the class, and she held that picture up over my head like this. And she said, class, she said, look at this stupid picture. She said, everybody knows cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white, cows are sometimes brown, black, and white, all three. Never are cows blue. That just doesn't happen. She says, Gary, don't you ever do anything like that again. She called my mother, right? My mother had to go to school. I mean, this was a big deal for my mother. My mother had to go to school. And the teacher said, I think there's something wrong with Gary. He colored a cow blue. I think you might want to take him to a psychiatrist. I think he might be crazy. So that night, my mother and my father sat me down in the living room, and my mother said to me, she says, Gary, she said, why did you color that cow blue? And I said, well, Ma, I mean, it wasn't me, it was you. I mean, you were the one. You told me that people got lonely, sad, they got blue. A cow, sad, lonely, I colored the cow blue. So my mother and my father said to me, you know, you go outside and play for a while. We got to talk about this. So I went outside, and you got to know my parents. My father had to drop out of school in the third grade to go to work because of the Depression, right? My mother had to drop out of school in the eighth grade to go to work because of the Depression. So these weren't what you would call upscale urban liberals. I mean, these were hard scrabble working people who had to work for a living their whole life. And they were very, very practical people, although with a lot of common sense. And I didn't really think this was going to have a good ending for me. So, you know, 15 minutes go by, my mother opens the door. She says, Gary, come back in here. And I went back in, and my mother and my father said to me, she said, you know, Gary, we talked about what you did. We talked about what you said. And we decided that the next time you want to color a cow blue, you go ahead and color a cow blue. And it was like the best advice that anybody has ever given me in my life. You know, I was too young to realize it at the time, but that kind of validated my creativity. And so my mother called the teacher at school and said, hey, you know, next time he does something like that, let him. We don't care. Let him. So 2-3 weeks later, everybody in class had to write a paper about what they did on their summer vacation. And you know, the kids were writing things like, I went to Waukegan, you know, and I went to Wisconsin Dells. Well, I wrote on my paper about how I went out in the backyard on my summer vacation, and I built a rocket ship out of tin cans and aluminum foil, and I flew it to the moon. And so my teacher the next day just gave the paper back and said, well, that was interesting work, Gary. So that's really how it started. That's really where it came from. As you said, I read a lot of comic books, and the reason for that, again, was my mother, a very, very practical woman. She told me, she said, you know, if you want to get out of this town, you don't want to spend the rest of your life here. You don't want to wind up running your father's pool hall. The one thing you can do to make that happen is to read. You read, and that will get you out of this town. But, you know, good mother that she was, she never put any restrictions on what I could read. So what I read? I read what kids read. I read comic books. I read Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, you know, Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge. I read comic books. And the other thing I read, my father was not a big reader, but he did have his favorites. And what my father read was what in those days they called true crime magazines. And I don't know if there is an equivalent today. I haven't, I'm a little afraid to look, but in those days, a true crime magazine was a magazine that published stories about true crime. And they were illustrated with pictures that had been taken at the crime scene. And these crime scenes were mostly murders. So if you ever saw a movie called Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks, Jude Law plays a photographer who goes around to crime scenes and takes pictures of the corpses, and sometimes arranges the corpses so they're more photogenic. Well, that was a real thing. The photographers really did that. And those were the kinds of magazines that my father read, true crime magazines showing pretty horrific murders. And again, my mother never said, don't read that stuff, it'll rot your brain. She encouraged me to read whatever. Luckily, I progressed from graphic depictions of true crime to better noir mysteries like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, Mickey Spillane, and I became a real fan of noir mysteries. I love noir mystery and noir movies, and of course, comic books gave way to cartoons, comic strips. So those are my big loves, and I became a writer. I was living in San Francisco. I'd written written a bunch of short stories, sold them all. I got a 4-book deal with Doubleday for science fiction novels. Basically, I could write anything I wanted and they would publish it. So I wrote the first one, a novel called Killer Bowl about football in the future, played as a blood sport. I wrote the second one, Generation Removed, about the problems of the elderly and young people. The third one was The Resurrectionist. And the fourth one that I was going to write to fulfill my contract, I wanted to do something totally unique, something that I'd never done before, something that nobody had ever done before. So I wanted to incorporate the loves of my youth, my wasted youth. I wanted to incorporate cartoons, comic strips, and noir mysteries, and that, that's not easy. So I was looking around for a concept, something I could hang this on, and I was watching Saturday morning cartoons on Saturday morning. It's for research. I told my wife, just purely for research. I'm doing this, and I become taken not with the commercials, which not with the cartoons themselves, which were pretty simplistic and badly drawn compared to the ones I'd grown up with. But I became taken with the commercials, which showed cartoon characters like Tony the Tiger, the Trix Rabbit, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Captain Crunch, cartoon characters talking to real kids, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I said, wow, what a great concept that would be for a novel. What would a world be like if you had a world where cartoon characters were real? So I spent the next year working on that premise. I studied cartoons and comic strips to see what kinds of things cartoon characters did that did not exist in human world, and came up with a detective, a hard-boiled private eye named Eddie Valiant. Named him after my father in honor of the reading material he gave me when I was a kid, and came up with a story that could only work in a world where cartoon characters were real. Couldn't work in a real human world. It wouldn't work. So I wrote the book. Like I say, it took me a year, and sent it to Doubleday. And of course, this was the book that fulfilled my 4-book contract with them. And for the first time in my writing career, I'd never had this happen before, but for the first time, I got a reject. They rejected Roger Rabbit.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I called my editor and I said, sure. And I said, why did you reject this? I said, this is the best thing I've ever written. And she said, oh, I agree. She said, it's funny. It's unique. I've never read anything like this before. It's innovative. She said, but that's the problem. She said, it's so different from anything you've ever written, so different from anything anybody's ever written, that I had to send it over to the marketing department and get them to okay it. So they were the ones who rejected it. So I went to the marketing department. I went to the head of the marketing department. I said, Charlie, what's going on here? Why did you reject my book? And he said, frankly, there's no category for it on the bookstore shelf. I can't sell this book. It's not a regular mystery. It's not a kid's book. It's not fantasy. It's not really science fiction. There's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. I can't sell it. I said, look, what would you do if somebody today brought you Gulliver's Travels or The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland? What would you do with those? And he thought for a minute. He says, yeah, I couldn't sell those either. So I went to my agent. I said, Bill, you know what? What are we going to do here? I said, if I can't publish this book, I don't want to be a writer anymore because this is what I want to do. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. He said, it's a great book. We'll find it a home. So he started sending it out to other editors, other publishers. And along the way, it got 110 rejects. Roger Rabbit was rejected 110 times. And in those days, you got your rejects by mail. They didn't come by email, like I guess they do now, but they came by mail. And my wife used to call my trip out to the mailbox every day, the daily disappointments, because I would go out and come back with 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 rejects. We're sorry, but we can't publish your book. And it was always for the same reason. Editors loved it. Marketing people said, sorry, we can't sell this book. So 110 rejects. The 111th went to St. Martin's Press, to a young woman named Rebecca Martin. And Rebecca had just published a major bestseller for St. Martin's Press. So the president of the company gave her a vanity project and said, look, whatever book you want to publish, the next book you publish, you can publish whatever you want. And just at that moment, Roger Rabbit came across her desk. Of course, she read it. She loved it. She went to the president of the company and said, here's the book I want to publish for my vanity project. And the president said, okay, I'll take it home. I'll read it tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow. So he went home, came back the next day. He said, Rebecca, he said, I told you could publish anything, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. There's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. And Rebecca stepped up to the plate and said, you either publish it or I quit. And so they published it. And albeit in very, very small quantities, I think less than 5,000 copies. If I had my writing career to live over again, if I could time travel back to the past and change one thing, the one thing I would change is I would go back and I would buy up all 5,000 of those copies, because they sold for, I think, $299. And now on eBay, they're going for $350, $400. So that was how Roger Rabbit came to be.
That's amazing. Just how, it's a tough road out there. People will reject you. And that's something that you got to be ready for. Anyone does. There'll be the downfalls, and then you never know when something might pick up, and you're lucky they will happen. And it's awesome how that.
Well, I always tell writers and any creative people, actually painters, artists, whatever you got, that if you believe in what you're doing and you stick with it, sooner or later you're going to succeed. Because the problem that most creative people have is they quit too soon. They quit after 109 rejects. They don't go for the 110th and the 111th. And it might have been the 111th. It might have been the 112th. It might have been the 262nd. But I would have kept going until somebody bought it. And the other thing that people want to know is, how did it get to be go from a book to a movie? And that happened. I sold the book to St. Martin's in 1980, but it didn't actually come out until 1981. It takes a year for a book to go through the process and come out. So from 1980 to 1981, I was just waiting. Well, mid 1980, I get a call at home phone. And the guy on the other end says, "Is this Gary K. Wolf?" I said, "Yes, it is." He says, "Well, this is Roy Disney from the Disney Company." And I said, "Yeah, right. Roy Disney calling me at home."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's going to happen, right? And he said, No, it's really Roy Disney. He said, "I read your book and I'm interested in knowing if you would be willing to have the Disney Company make it into a movie." I'm thinking, yeah, you read my book. It hasn't even come out yet. Somebody's fooling with me. He said, and it turned out that somebody at St. Martin's, I never found out who, and I really, really tried. I really tried to track this person down so I could kiss her or him full on the lips. Somebody sent a copy of the manuscript to Disney and said, "Hey, we're going to publish this book, and we think you guys would be interested in it." And they were indeed. I mean, it made its way all the way up to Roy Disney. And at the time, Disney really needed a movie based on something like Roger Rabbit. Disney in 1980 was in danger of becoming a second-rate movie studio. They were making mostly movies like The Nutty Professor and Flubber and the Black Hole and the Black Cauldron, which disappeared down the black hole. They were making movies that were intended to be the second half of a double feature, and there were no more double features. So they were not doing well. They had been offered E.T. and they turned it down. They'd been offered Star Wars and they turned it down. So they needed a hit. They needed a big, major hit. They also had another problem, that their stable of characters was getting old and kind of dated. They had Mickey Mouse, but he had kind of become the corporate spokesmouse, and you couldn't really have a lot of fun with him anymore. They had Donald Duck. You could have fun with Donald, but nobody could understand what he says. So, he was kind of limited. So they saw Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman as part of a new stable of characters that they could merchandise. And I don't know if you've ever been to Disneyland or a Disney store or actually any main street in the United States, but you see a lot of merchandise with Disney characters on it, right? They make a ton of money selling merchandise with their characters on it. And so they needed new characters to keep that revenue stream going. So they made me an offer on the movie, and frankly, they offered me more for the rights to the movie than I'd made on all my writing prior to that put together. And I'm not going to turn that down. Plus, it's Disney. But realistically, if you read the book, and if you haven't read the book, everybody should read the book. It's different from the movie a little bit thematically, because it's a book, not a movie. And as a book, it appeals to the writer's imagination. The reader's imagination. When you read it, you will see it in your mind. When you watch a movie, it's all right up there, and you don't have to work as hard. But in a book, you got to use your imagination a little bit. I didn't think the book was filmable. I didn't think that they could ever take my book, a world where cartoon characters exist in a real world, and make it into a believable movie. I just didn't think they had the horsepower. And in the early 1980s, when they started working on it, they really didn't. They tried a lot of different approaches. The technology wasn't there. They probably had the creativity, but the technology wasn't there to pull it off. They did some tests with, with Roger, with Pee Wee Herman as the voice of Roger. It didn't look very good. And they were kind of spinning their wheels. So maybe in 1982 or 3, they came to me and they said, we're not having any luck with this combination of animation and live action. What would you think if we, instead of having animated characters, the cartoon characters were costume characters like they are at Disneyland? And I'm thinking, oh, geez, I'm going to wind up with Fred McMurray as Eddie Valiant, and Haley Mills as Jessica, Dean Jones as the rabbit, and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman. And I said, don't you think that negates the premise just a little bit? And yeah, probably. So they went back to doing it the way they wanted to do it, but couldn't. And it really wasn't going anywhere. Then in 1985, a couple of things happened. Michael Eisner came in, and he replaced Roy Disney. Roy Disney was forced out. Michael Eisner came in and brought with him a guy named Jeff Katzenberg. He'd worked with the 20th Century. Jeff Katzenberg was in charge of film production at Disney. And, the first thing they did when they came in and took over Disney was to throw out all of the projects that they had going before, which is what happens when somebody takes over a studio. They just threw out everything that they'd been working on before, all except for Roger Rabbit. They kept Roger Rabbit because they knew they had to make that movie. And Jeff Katzenberg took personal control over it. They brought in somebody as an outside producer, which Disney had never done before. They'd never used an outside producer, but they brought in an outside producer, a little known guy named Steve Spielberg, right, to produce this movie for them. And Steve had actually read the book when it first came out and really enjoyed it and really had the vision. He thought that it would make a great movie. So when they came to him and asked him to produce this movie, he jumped on that. And to show you what a difference Steve Spielberg makes in Hollywood, okay? In 1982 or 3, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers and said, hey, look, we're doing this movie. It's live action animation. We'd like to have Bugs Bunny do a cameo in this movie. He'd come out on screen, he'd say, what's up, Doc? He'd go off screen, he'd be on screen for no more than 20 seconds. What do you think? And Warner Brothers looked at Roy Disney and said, get lost. There's no way that Bugs Bunny is ever going to be in a Walt Disney picture. That is just never going to happen. So 5 years later, Steve Spielberg walks into Warner Brothers and makes basically the same request. Hey, can we have Bugs Bunny for a cameo in this movie I'm making for Disney? And they say to Steve Spielberg, of course you can have Bugs. What about Porky Pig? Don't you want him to it? And Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote, Yosemite Sam, Tweety Bird, Sylvester, take them all. So Steve Spielberg walked out with the entire Warner Brothers cartoon library. For very little, he had to pay very little licensing fees for that. I mean, it was ridiculously small. The only catch was that Bugs Bunny, being a superstar, had a contract. And in Bugs Bunny's contract, it stipulated that you could not have Mickey Mouse on screen by himself. Bugs had to be on screen with Mickey every time Mickey was on screen because they were co-equal superstars. And not only that, but they had to have the exact same number of words of dialogue. So perks of a superstar. And you can go through and watch the movie and you will see that Bugs and Mickey are in every scene together. And if you count their dialogue, you'll see they had the exact same number of words. Well, Steve Spielberg, when he came on, brought in a guy named Bob Zemeckis. And Bob Z had been offered this as a directing job back in 1981. And he had also read the book in 1981, thought it would make a great movie, but he didn't believe that Disney had the horsepower to make it in 1981. So he went on to do some, little known things like Back to the Future and Forrest Gump and, other things you've never heard of. But when Steve Spielberg got involved, Bob Z came on too. And Bob Z brought with him Kathleen Turner, who we'd worked with in Romancing the Stone, as the voice of Jessica. We discovered Charlie Fleischer working in a comedy club, and we had heard about him, and we went to see his act. And what really put it over the top for us was when he did this. He's terrific with voices, Charlie Fleischer. He was doing this bit about Donald Duck having an orgasm. And it was absolutely hilarious. That's our Roger Rabbit. So Steve wanted to bring in an outside animator to work as lead animator on the project, and they looked at a lot of different ones. Everybody wanted Chuck Jones, but Chuck Jones was elderly at the time, and the Hollywood people, in one of the few acts of humanity I've ever seen in Hollywood, decided, even though Chuck Jones wanted to do it, they decided not to hire him because they were afraid that the stress of the project would be so great it might kill him. And that's so unlike Hollywood. Oh, it's going to kill him. Hey, well, you don't work him to death, we'll bury him in the back lot. So then they took a look at Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi is known for the X-rated cartoon Fritz the Cat. And I often wonder what Ralph Bakshi would have done with Jessica, but Steve thought he was kind of a thug, so they passed on him, and they finally wound up with a guy named Richard Williams. And Dick Williams had won the Academy Award for the Pink Panther. He had done a series of beer commercials in England. He was British, an expat living in London. And he had done a series of beer commercials featuring a cat with 9 lives who sacrifices 1 life in every commercial for a beer. And if you watch those, I think they're on YouTube. I can't remember the name of the beer, but if you watch those, you'll see a lot of the same bits in those beer commercials that he later used in Roger Rabbit. And what made Roger Rabbit different from every live action animated feature that had come before, and there'd been others before. Mary Poppins had the penguins and Mary Poppins and Dick Van Dyke dancing together. Jerry the Mouse danced with who was the guy I can't remember in a movie that, and even going all the way back, Disney had made a live action animated movie. Alice in Wonderland with a live action girl and animated characters way back in the early days, but none of them looked real. And the reason was that they didn't have the technology. So they would lock the camera down and the actors would move in front of the camera and the animators would animate over it. And it made it much easier for the animators because they didn't have to worry about changing perspectives. But when Bob Z came on board, he told, Dick Williams told him, look, you make this like any other movie and we'll worry about the animation. And as an example, the movie starts out with a cartoon, which Dick Williams hand animated. He hand animated every cell of that opening cartoon himself. And if you look at that opening cartoon, you'll see a couple of things. First of all, wonderfully funny, brilliant animation, just a really funny bit. But if you look at the floor, it's a kitchen floor. It's black and white tiles. Now, there's no reason in an animated movie, well, that had to be black and white tile. It could have been an all white floor, would have made it ridiculously simpler to animate, but it's black and white tile. And that means that in every cell, 24 per second, the perspective changes so the whole floor, every line on that floor, every square, the perspective changes 24 times in a second. And so that all has to be animated. And it's an incredible job of animation. But Dick Williams wanted to start it off with that to blow people away and to show other animators just what this movie was going to be and what they were capable of. So, they did the movie, and I was intimately involved in all kinds of meetings with some of the most creative people I've ever met in my life. I mean, I'd be in a room with 35 just genius animator people, and all these people were throwing out ideas on how to make my book and my concept funnier. And I'm thinking to myself, where were you guys when I was writing this book at 4 a.m. on my kitchen table? If I'd had you guys with me then, I would have had a Pulitzer Prize winner for sure. But they finished the movie. They had the premiere at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, and I was sitting in the first balcony with the VIPs, and I had on my left was Kathleen Turner, who was the most gorgeous woman I've ever met in my life. On my right was Amy Irving, who was Stephen's wife at the time, who was the singing voice of Jessica because Kathleen was pregnant when she did the voices and couldn't sing. So Stephen asked Amy to, jump in and give it a whack, and she did. And actually, nobody noticed. So I was sitting between two of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life, and I'm about to see my movie all the way through for the first time because they were still working on it to a couple of days before they released it. I had never seen my credit on screen, so I'm going to see my movie. I'm going to see my credit on screen for the first time. I'm sitting between two of the most beautiful women in the world. I'm thinking to myself, life doesn't get any better.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I'm saying life doesn't get any better than this. And then life got better because Kathleen put her hand on my leg and leaned over and whispered in my ear, she says, "Gary, are you excited?" And I said, "Kathleen, you have no idea." So the movie went on to gross $780 million that year, the biggest grossing movie of the year. The next year it won 4 Academy Awards. I got to go to the Academy Awards ceremony where I sat close enough to share to smell her perfume. And I got a 3-picture writing deal with Disney. So I got to tell you, I've colored a lot of cows blue in my life, and life is good.
Yeah, awesome, and congratulations on that success. It's been great. Real quick, I'm going to introduce Waking Bacon, who just jumped in. What's up, dude?
Hey, what's going on?
He'll be asking some questions. Thank you so much for that amazing story, and we want to hear some more. But let's get to a quick question. If Ray's got something, and then we'll have one from the live chat, and then we'll go into Awaken. Ray, what's up, man?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. I love it. It's really, when you think about it, all it comes down to is just persistence. You got to be on these people just until you get that yes. Like you said, waiting. If it's the 100th yes or the 100 or 250th yes, you just got to keep trying. I guess you covered a lot of stuff, but I guess my question would be like, what is your proudest achievement? I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but like, as far as like writing, was it the movie that was made, or like, was it another story outside of Roger Rabbit?
No, I tell you, my proudest achievement is that I created something that has gone on to become a cultural icon. Roger Rabbit is known worldwide. Jessica Rabbit is the fantasy girl of probably every teenage boy who ever lived. Yeah, absolutely. I went to China on a lecture tour. The animation industry in China is really robust. They're doing some really phenomenal stuff. And I went over there on a lecture tour, and I lectured at a number of Chinese universities to their animation departments. And when I told basically that story that I just told, every time I mentioned the name Jessica, got a laugh. And so I asked my translator, I said, "Why are they laughing when I say Jessica?" They said, "Well, in China, Jessica is known as Big Melons." Well, obviously, and I'm the melon man. So I think my proudest achievement is that when I die, on my tombstone, they'll write, "Here lies Gary K. Wolf. He created Roger Rabbit in Toontown," and that'll be enough. I mean, that'll be good. Yeah. That's
incredible. Amazing. It's very interesting too, how you mentioned Disney turned down Star Wars in the beginning too. Now they turned down a lot of good stuff. Yeah. Now they're all over it. Yeah. Now they own it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want me to continue on, Mr. Switch, I got one more. So being a creative person, like in this field too, as well, like what is like some advice that you would give to somebody looking to like make a movie, bring their project to life, or just something in the creative field, whatever they got on their mind? It's not as easy as it used to be.
And I mean, it was never easy, obviously, but it's not as easy as it used to be. It's even harder now to publish a book than it used to be, because when I got started, there were people doing it, but there weren't that many people, and the talent pool was pretty small. There weren't a whole lot of people who were operating at a really, really high level. Over the years, as education's gotten better, as more people have heard me talk about never give up, and if you want to get out of it, read. As more people have heard what you have to do to succeed, the talent pool has gotten better, and there are now many, many more really, really good writers than there were back in my day when I was cranking out Roger Rabbit and science fiction stuff. So the competition's tougher. But if you're a creative person with a really unique idea, a really interesting and unique style, and you really believe in yourself, never give up and keep plugging away at it. And sooner or later, your creative process will see the light of day. It's just I tell this to everybody who says to me, I've got this great idea for a book. What do I do? I say, well, what you got to do is write the book first. Nobody's going to buy the idea anymore, which is what it used to be in my day. I sold 4 books based on nothing. I mean, whatever I wanted to write. I've sold other books since, just based on an idea. You can't do that anymore. Even I can't do that anymore. You have to write the book. And it has to be a book that is written as well as you know how to write a book. Because it used to be in the old days that publishers would take somebody who was good enough and they would assign a really great editor, and the editor would polish and really buff the writing and really get it up to a high professional level. They don't do that anymore. You've got to come in with something that's ready to go to press. So you put it through the typesetter and print it in a book. So you have to learn your trade. You have to have an interesting idea. You have to do it. And then you have to not give up when it comes to selling it, because that's part of the process.
That's awesome. Great advice.
Yeah, you got to be persistent, and then eventually something you did not think was going to take off is the biggest thing. If you were a child of a certain age in 1988, and or just a person in general, you were all about some Roger Rabbit. It was the most unusual movie that came out, when in my time, like during, I think I was 12 when that came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you couldn't put your finger on anything else that was similar to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I didn't find out till years later about who censored Roger Rabbit, that it was, a book in the first place. It was just, everybody's like, Donald Duck and Daffy Duck's on the same screen at the same time. Are you kidding me? I'm aboard.
What's been interesting to me is that the change in my fan base. When the movie came out, my fan base was probably young adults, high school, upper level high school kids, up to adults. That was my fan base. And then when the movie came out on VHS, parents who had seen it when it first came out started using it as a babysitter. And so all of a sudden my fan base got older because my original fans were older, but it also got younger. And I started seeing more kids. And then when it came out on DVD, a lot of the kids who see it on VHS were now using it as a babysitter. And so my fan base continues to stay young through some of the people who have seen it when it first came out are now in their 80s, 70s and 80s. And they've remained fans all through. So it's been a real joy for me to see that, because I've touched the lives of generations of people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Really
And-
amazing. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And
Al.
writing the book initially, which came out in what, 1981?
1981, yeah.
Okay, everybody has their own creative process, so here you are, you're making the idea of who censored Roger Rabbit. Why a rabbit? Why a bunny rabbit?
Oh, why a rabbit?
Where did that, you set out to write, kind of like a,
Why wasn't it Roger Raccoon, right?
yeah, exactly.
Well, I put a lot of time and effort into the characters. For the lead character, I wanted the lead character to be a Disney-esque character, somebody that people could read and say, "Oh yeah, that's kind of like something Disney would do," even though I had no idea that he would ever eventually be a Disney character. So I looked at the characters that they had, and they had a lot of characters that were like star characters, Mickey and Goofy and Pluto and Donald. They didn't have a real major rabbit star like Bugs Bunny. So I said, okay, so this is going to be kind of a Disney rabbit. All right. That's where I started. I made him a brown rabbit just because Bugs was gray, and the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland was obviously white. So I made him a brown rabbit in the book. Dick Williams, when he sat down with me to visualize the characters, which I had seen in my head, but I'm not an artist, so I'd never actually drawn them. So Dick Williams visualized them, and he said, can we change him from a brown rabbit to a white rabbit, because he'll pop more on the screen. He'll be more noticeable than a brown rabbit, which will fade into the background. I had no problem with that. They kept his red overalls, his polka dot bow tie, all the rest of it. Dick added the shock of red hair because he thought that was a nice visual touch. And I mean, it's Dick Williams. I'm not going to argue with that. Jessica was, in Earlville, where I was growing up, an hour and 47 minutes from Waukegan. Where I was growing up, through some genetic fluke, the boys outnumber the girls by 35-1. So, like good luck getting a date if you're the president of the Checkers Club, right? So Jessica was my conception of what my ideal woman would be if I could ever get a date with any woman at all. And I based her on a Tex Avery character, Red Hot Riding Hood, who was in a number of cartoons in the 40s and early 50s, Swing Shift Cinderella and Red Hot Riding Hood, mixed with a couple of the film stars that I thought were really sexy, Rita Hayworth, especially Veronica Lake with her hairdo. And that was Jessica. If you look at some of the old Red Hot Riding Hood characters, you'll see, or cartoons, you'll see that in a few of them she does a dance that's very similar to the dance that Jessica does in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I think my most successful character out is Baby Herman, because I based him on a number of the adult baby characters that were around in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So there were a lot of them, and it was so successful that when I showed the manuscript to my agent and he read it, he says, "Oh, you can't use this Baby Herman character." And I said, "Why not?" He says, "Well, that's not yours. I've seen that character before." I said, "No, really, trust me on this. I made that up." So that's really pretty much where they came from. Oddly enough, when they were animating the movie, the animators had the hardest time with Jessica because they were Disney animators, and they had been used to animating ducks and geese and mice and barnyard animals, dogs. They could not get their minds around animating not just a woman, but the very essence of woman, of womanhood. So Bob,
Yes.
yeah, so Bob Z went to, we filmed it in London, filmed the movie in London because Steve Spielberg likes the food there. Go figure. We filmed in London, but no, actually, because they had a sound stage that was big enough to make the movie, and they didn't have one like that in the United States. They do now, but they didn't then. And it was a 3-level sound stage. The set was on the top level. The puppeteers who were manipulating the real objects were on the second level. And then Bob Z was down on the lower level with a bank of video monitors where he was looking at what the cameras were filming on the top level, and also had animators down there animating over the screen so he could see what it would look like. But so we filmed in London, and Bob Z went down to the north end of London or south end or wherever the strip joints were, and hired a stripper and brought her back to the studio. and they put her in a red dress, and they had her walk down the runway to the song that Jessica was singing in the movie. And just so the animators could see what a woman looked like when she walked. And so then he had her go back and take off her dress and do the whole thing again in her bra and panties. And then he had her go back and take off her bra and panties and do the whole thing again naked.
What?
And so for weeks after that, you would go through the animation department, and the animators would say, geez, I've been here working so long, so many nights, I forgot what a woman looks like. Let's run the film again.
That's very.
Let's watch it one more time.
Yeah.
3 more times. Yeah, I wanted to. I had a question from someone in the chat, but I think you pretty much answered it. It was from Frank on Flint. What was the thought behind making Jessica Rabbit? But I think you pretty much summed it there.
Yeah, she was my fantasy girl. And since then I've done a lot of work in Hollywood. And when I tell Hollywood people that, people say Jessica Rabbit is your idea of the ideal woman, and I said, yeah. They said, well, maybe you should stick with writing like Turkish prison movies or war movies where there are all men, and you won't have to deal with feminine issues because you clearly don't get it, So.
Oh man!
Wow.
Awaken. What else you got for us?
Yeah, I had something like 2 seconds ago. You literally saying that made the words like.
Go ahead. Think about it.
Flip out of my head. Yes, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. Oh yes. Okay. So the book came out in 1981. You probably started writing it in the 1970s, correct?
I started writing it about a year before. A year before, I sold it in 1980, and I started writing it in 1979. Yeah.
Okay. So it was a pretty big deal. Got very popular with a completely different crowd, and then through whatever magic you used, Disney got a hold of it, and then they're putting Warner Brothers characters, on the screen together. That had to have been a hard sell, so if you were going around to anyone and you were like, hey, I want to, this is the movie I want to make. It's based on, my book, and this is what happens in it. Was there any like odd pitch meetings or meetings that you walked into with your idea being like, okay, this is, or did everybody pretty much have a general idea of what they were getting into when they heard the pitch?
You got here late. You got to go back and hear the rest of the podcast.
You want real quick?
I mean, everybody. The reason why this movie was so successful, there's a reason. Aside from the brilliance of the source material, the reason why this movie was so successful Everybody involved in this movie believed in the project. They believed in my book. They believed in the concept of a world where cartoon characters were real. Everybody who worked on this movie was at the absolute top of his or her game. There were no second raters working on this movie. Everybody was at the top of his or her game. Even people who were working as animators were the absolute best animators that animation had to offer. I mean, some of the people who animated on this movie, Rob Minkoff, went on to direct The Lion King and Stuart Little. Eric Goldberg went on to direct a whole bunch of stuff, Andreas Deja. And these guys, Tom Cito, these guys were animators on this movie, and they've gone on to direct really major, important animation projects. Bob Hoskins. So what can I tell you about Bob Hoskins? He is the most phenomenal actor that I've ever seen in my life. He makes it look effortless. And my only regret about the movie, if I have a regret, my only regret about the movie is that Bob Hoskins was so good in that movie and made what he did look so easy that he didn't even get nominated for an Academy Award. And the guy should have won the Academy Award hands down, because I saw him standing all alone in an empty warehouse with a green screen behind him, doing a scene and making everything up in his head. It was the most phenomenal job of acting I've ever seen. And I think that's really why the movie was so successful.
Yeah, that's something that I've always wondered about the movie, especially watching it, excuse me, as an adult later on. It's like what the experience had to have been for Bob Hoskins being the only person on the set for the majority of the movie outside of the cast, I guess being around, and how he had to interact. There was the scene where I think he kissed the weasels towards the end. That had to have been
I kissed Roger.
kind of
He kissed Roger.
He kissed, okay.
Bob Hoskins, consummate method actor. He, when the gorilla threw him out of the back door of the Ink and Paint Club, of course, was on a wire, but they really dropped him. And when he landed on those trash cans, he broke 3 ribs.
No.
I thought, oh man, here goes our production schedule. By golly, he came in the next day all taped up and carried on like nothing had happened at all. Just a phenomenal guy. Gone too soon, and I really miss him.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Excuse me. I didn't even know he had a British accent until years.
Yeah,
years after.
I first saw him in a movie called The Long Good Friday, where he's not just British, he's Cockney. I mean, he has a real British accent, although even that's a little bit of a fake out, because he's a classically trained Shakespearean actor, and a lot of his accent and his Cockney swagger is was just put on. He was really a very, very fine gentleman, very refined guy, and a tremendous actor.
Yeah, he seemed like a really just a tough dude. You really bought his character.
Well, he seemed like a prototypical LA private eye, and that was hard to do for a guy with an English accent, but he pulled it off. I can't say enough about him.
Yeah, he pulled it off real well. I mean, considering the other movies that he was in, and that I had never heard of Bob Hoskins previous to Roger Rabbit. So I mean, I had no idea if he had done anything at all or ever done anything on this side of the pond, I guess.
Yeah, he should have won. He should have won the Academy Award for, I think it was something called Mona Lisa. He was nominated for it the year before, and he certainly should have won it for. I think Paul Newman won it instead for the Color of Money, but he should have been nominated for Roger Rabbit and wasn't. It's my big regret.
Yeah, did Roger Rabbit do very well in the award-winning area?
You gotta rewind the podcast and come in earlier.
I know
See,
that
but
there was a
yes,
time
yes,
change.
the
change
700
on
Hold
that.
on, watch it real quick. We'll wait for you. We'll wait
Till
for
way
you.
later.
Seven
Yes.
hundred and $80 million, 4 Academy Awards.
I
Shares
strike the
perfume.
question.
Shares perfume.
Ray, do you have something for us?
No. I mean, if I was to ask one more question, actually, we will do it. So if you were to attempt to do another iconic character, would you?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I'm working on a whole bunch of stuff now. I'm working on a couple of animated movies. One of them is called Ranger Raccoon. Yeah, that's got some potential.
Is there one Jessica Rabbit Xerius business?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Jessica Rabbit Xerius business?
Is Jessica Rabbit still in business or?
No. There was aren't you working on your new novel?
Oh, the new novel. Oh, serious business. Oh, that's the first. That's interesting because that's the first time I've ever heard anybody say that out loud. Yeah, Roger. Yeah, Jessica Rabbit, Serious Business. It's my new novel. It's the 4th novel in my Toontown series, and it is an origin story. Jessica Rabbit, where she came from, how she went from Jessica Rabbit to Jessica Rabbit, how she met Roger, and how Toontown came to be. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
Very cool.
Question. When we spoke about it, tell us a little bit about your experience in Waukegan.
And where? Waukegan.
Waukegan.
Well, I as I told you, my folks were pretty simple folks, and we used to, to us, going to Chicago was a trip. It was 72 miles, but it took about 2 hours in those days. And for vacations, we always used to go up to Wisconsin. We went up to Waukegan. We went up to Wisconsin Dells, and we went up to a place called Lake Namakogon. And I still have a plaque on my wall here that I got in Lake Namakogon. And of course, this was a great vacation for my father, who loved to fish, but it was not much of a vacation for my mother because we generally had to stay in a cabin with an outhouse and no running water. So, not much of a vacation for her, but I have some really, really fond memories of Wisconsin, especially Wisconsin Dells. I saw my first duck boat in Wisconsin Dells. And now there are duck boat parades in Boston whenever one of our teams wins a championship. So I'm basically a child of the Midwest, and I think when you read my writing, that Midwestern sensibility comes through. It's all very moral. The good guy always wins, the bad guy always loses, and there's a certain Midwestern sensibility to it that you don't get in East Coasters and you don't get in West Coasters. It's just there in the heartland. Yeah.
Waken.
Cool. What's up?
You got any questions? Any more questions?
I've been asking questions.
Got another one? Gotta make sure I drain you guys of questions.
Do I have another one? When is the new book due out?
I'm guessing next year. That I can't predict publishing deadlines because they generally take a year. They take a lot longer than you would think, especially nowadays when they have electronic publishing and all that kind of stuff. But it only takes about a year, so I'm guessing next year you'll see it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I actually haven't read a book in probably 2 years, so this might be the first book I read.
This is going to be worth it. It's going to be
after a long hiatus.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get me some too, because I just I was just watching the Harry Potter series, and I ended up buying this book that came out I'm like, I need to get back to these books, So I ordered the book last night, like at 2 a.m, went to sleep. I was like, then I'm like, wait, I need to. And I was thinking about your new book, like, God, that's on my list. I got to get that one too. I want to know about Jessica Rabbit. I want to know more.
Well, something else. This will be an exclusive for you guys. I just signed the contract for audiobooks of my other two Toontown novels, Who Plugged Roger Rabbit and Who Whacked Roger Rabbit. Who Censored Roger Rabbit is already an audiobook, and you can see that in all my books and hear all about me if you visit my website at www.garywolf.com. But Censored is already an audiobook, and Plugged and Whacked will be audiobooks probably in the next 3 months. So for those of you who like hard-hitting rabbit adventure but don't like to read, here's your chance. You can just sit there and listen.
Is it bad? Is it bad that I do that? Is it bad that I'm like, oh, I really want to read this story, and the first thought in my head is there a video? Is there a movie? Is there an animation of it somewhere? None of these things. Is there an audiobook?
These audiobooks are really a lifesaver for me, because the way I used to do it, people would just send me money, and then I would call them on the phone and read it to them personally. So it's really a lot better for me.
Yeah, no doubt. I did. That was interesting to find out about. I always kind of assumed it about Roger Rabbit, like where his design came from, that it was trying to, emulate the Disney characters, and then wound up being a Disney character. That was very much news to me. I know that I came in late and I missed a bunch of stuff.
Don't worry.
That was the one thing.
When I come back next time, when the Jessica Rabbit novel comes out, then we won't start without you. All right.
We'll read it together. Hey, I got a quick question from Frank Flint. What was the idea of the villain in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the gut in the black coat?
Oh, Judge Doom. We just needed a villain, and like I told you, it had to be something that could not exist except in a world where cartoon characters were real. So we came up with this guy who looked like a human but was really a toon, and that couldn't exist anywhere but in a world where toons are real. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah, one of the freakiest villains in that time of my life.
Yeah, I think I've given more children nightmares with Judge Doom and his spinning eyeballs than I've ruined a lot of childhoods.
Because you left a lot to the imagination. Like, you never actually saw the entirety of Doom. The judge, we call him Judge Doom.
Yeah, Judge Doom. Right.
You never really saw his whole, because you saw like his eyeballs come out and his hair. You saw that he had red hair, I think. But he was never completely out of the skin, was he?
No, never.
So that left a lot to the imagination, I thought, to where it's like, oh, he could be a little bit of everybody. Yeah. Pretty crazy. But he was right up there with, when I was a kid, he was right up there with Darth Vader. As far as villains go.
Or the guy that shot Bambi's mother.
The guy that shot Bambi's mother. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That was tragic.
Probably the worst person ever right there. But
hey guys, we're reaching pretty much at the end. We've a little over an hour. Let's close up and let's have some closing statements. I want to start off with Ray. You guys, closing statement.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. Now I actually feel embarrassed that I haven't read a book in forever. So now I actually feel empowered to read. So I'm definitely going to check out some of your books. This is great, though. Thanks for the advice. Thanks for sharing your time with us. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Awaken.
Like I said, Who Censored Roger Rabbit was a little bit of a surprise for me, because I wasn't aware of it for years after the movie came out, until I was an adult. And, it's kind of like when I brought up the question earlier about, it kind of being a hard sell, because, you're writing kind of a noir detective novel, with all these other elements. And back in the day and today, it's kind of what helped form me as a human. It's things like that were just kind of off the beaten path, just really are what sucked me in. And that was a combination and of characters at the time, especially the movie, that really got to me and sang to me, so I find it amazing. And it's really cool to get to talk to you. No, I was tardy. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I would take your demerits back because you're, I like what you say. So
Thanks.
You're forgiven.
Forgiveness. In the description right now, you guys can find Gary K. Wolf's website is right there. So click the link in the description. That way you can find out more about his books. Buy them, I'll check them out. If you haven't read them, read them, watch the movies. Gary, thank you for this opportunity. It's been
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Guys, I mean, from where I started, I thought I was going to wind up being some hack writer who was going to be working a day job and, writing mornings and nights. And it's just such a pleasure for me that my writings and my characters have gotten such acceptance and such acclaim that I'm able to do this full time. It's not even like working. It's like having fun all day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun ride. And we all grew up together and didn't know it. We all grew up loving what you've done, your creations, and the love that we have for Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit, and just all your creations. And we appreciate your time. And I hope, again with your new book, if I missed it, was it coming out soon or about to, or just?
It'll be out probably the end of this year, early next year.
Okay.
Publishing is hard to figure.
So it gives us some time to catch up on some more knowledge before that book and get into some of the, whether it's who plugged the Roger Rabbit. That was in 91. We had to just get back some of those old books, and that's what I want to do is catch up on that goodness there and enjoy what you've done. And
all right, I want to see a bump in my Amazon sales next month because all you guys are going to buy them all. Right?
Yeah, we're gonna start buying them, all of us.
Yeah, we're gonna get back into reading.
All right, hey, thanks, guys.
Those are the books without the moving pictures. Anyway, okay.
I will be doing a premiere on my Facebook channel and another premiere from this episode. In about 2 days, I'm gonna do some re-edits and add some, before and after stuff. Might add some things so I can premiere it again and watch it again. So people will be seeing this again in the next few days on 2 different sites. So thank you so much, Gary, for your time and appreciate you so much.
Thanks. My pleasure.
See you guys. Everyone who joined in the chat. Thank you so much for Frank and everyone else. Thank you again, Ray, Awaken, and see you guys next time. Later, Gary. Take care, guys.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.